Once there was a Danish king called Hedingus. He was raised in Sweden by the Jotun, Vagnethus. They were mourning Hathgreppa, daughter and wife. He wasn't sure how he would go on with his life. Then they went to see the goddess of grief, Inaras. So they went forth towards the mountain king's hall, under which was the sanctum of a god's dire fall. At the mountain entrance they met the Minerin, a beautiful woman to guide them to the mountain rim. Further and further in they tread, beckoned by their call. We have come to see Sijyn, Hedingus said to the king. Vagnethus followed. We hear she is your tenant and kin. The king followed. She and Loki resides beneath my kingdom. For pity's sake visit, but disturb and suffer a wrath most fearsome. And with thanks to the king, the guards let them further in. Sijyn sat beside her husband's rock, which sat atop a mound. A snake's venom dripped from fang to head and to the ground. Her face, once majestic, was now marred with grief and regret. They looked down at her toiling and crying over Loki's sweat. With entrails of his son was the god of mischief bound. Turning to meet them, she asked, "Why have you come?" "To share the loss of my wife. To her kin she did succumb." Vagnethus spoke, "To grieve for my daughter who was torn apart." Her eyes were regal, and their words had clearly touched her heart. So they spoke for hours until emotion struck them dumb. Time gave them ease, and little by little their miasma drained, and so it went into the ground beneath, the soil becoming stained. The relief of the gods became the impetus for the sins of men, so much had her family suffered at the hands of her kinsmen. Loki, god of lies and flame of the gods, gave an expression pained. It's been a time since we had company. It's nice to have you here. So much time has passed, and so much remains, so we rarely have the world here. The latest news was the death of my grandmama, Sark al Yamama. Hedingus and Vagnethos looked at her face, that became twisted by trauma. Sadly so did the guard, and thus began a new kind of drama. Though recalling the warning of the king took flight, they were not so foolish as to challenge the mountain ring's might. With the wailing of Sijyn at their backs, they rushed to the mine ring. With their aid did they escape the mountain racers, saving their skin, and so they would never again set the mountain within their sight. With little pause they wandered on. A little sadness was now gone, but sympathy for Sijyn took its place. Like a scar the memory left a trace. Yet they walked on, hopeful of a morrow yon. So that was Sijyn. It is yet another entry in my attempt to combine Norse and Arab folklore. And if you're not familiar with the subject, then Hedingus and Vagnethus are epic characters with a story of their own. And I combined that with the story of Loki and his wife Sijyn. And then I combined further Sijyn with the Arabic concept of Sijyn, which is the furthest place of hell, and the situation where your husband is bound with the entrails of your son. That sounds very much like hell to me. And then I elaborated on her further, because in the old stories she doesn't really have a parentage. So I invented one where she's descended partially from Sark al-Yamama, who was an Arabic pre-Islamic hero who had incredible sight, much like Heimdall, and the site is very important in victory. And her name, Sijyn, means something along the lines of victorious girlfriend. So that was it. Originally, it was going to be accompanied with the Ballad of the Mountain King's Hall, but I decided against it because it was too short and far too upbeat. Next week I hope to return with a poem about Gothenburg and its 400 years jubilee, which is this year. If you would like to read the poem for yourself, it's available on my blog, links in the description. And if you like my content, please comment, like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notification. Thank you for listening.